I think many converts, if you ask them, like, what was it that made you become Jewish? For all I can say is it felt natural. There were many years where I knew deep down that that was going to be my life's path, but I didn't know how I was going to get to it. If you think of it, my husband and I are the only people who could do this. This was meant for us. This was made for us. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says that if you see a void anywhere, a need, and if you can fill it, then you need to fill it.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today, we have an incredible woman. Her name is Eliana Duthie. You might remember that we had a while back her husband, and he had a fascinating story. And I was so interested in his story that I said, let's hear the story of his wife, Eliana. So Eliana actually has so many parts to her story, and I'm so excited for her to share with us, coming from a non-Jewish background, converting to Judaism, meeting her husband, being part of a biracial marriage, and then moving on shluchas to South Africa, where she is now on shluchas, the Rebbe's shlucha. Thank you so much for joining us, Eliana.
Thank you for having me.
This is quite a story, quite a ride, like almost a roller coaster ride. I'm so excited to share your story with everyone here. Start at the very beginning. Tell us a little about your background.
Sure. I was raised in, I guess you could say, a traditional American family. My father is an officer in the Navy. My mother also served time in the military. And then when she gave birth to me, she went into the public sector and started working there. My parents divorced when I was about 8 years old. And in terms of religion, we weren't really raised with any specific religion. My father had a Lutheran background, my mother had an Episcopalian background, but they didn't bring into our life the concept of praying or giving thanks. Christmas was just Santa Claus commercial. Easter also, there was no mention of God or anything. So growing up, we really lived just without any type of religion, but I felt always that there was something missing, and I didn't know what that was. I mean, I'm 8 years old, and I just felt like, okay, this is how life is, but there has to be something more. Um,
Did
and
you believe in God? Did you believe in God at the time? Or there was no God in your life? Like, was he a presence in your life, or was it like a faraway concept?
it's I knew there was a God, but I didn't know what God meant for me.
Hmm. Were you raised by your mother or your father? Which one? Like, were you living by which side were you living, or both?
I was raised by my mother full time. I had visiting rights with my father, and since my
Hmm.
father's in the military, he moved around the United
Hmm.
States. So whenever my brother and I would go to visit him, it would be wherever he was stationed at the time. So, um, but in a few years after my parents like finalized their divorce, my mother was a single mom, and she needed a community. She needed people to support. Her mother didn't live close to us. The closest relative that we had was an aunt that was in Charlotte, which was
Hmm.
about 3 hours away. So she really needed help, and she wasn't supported much by.
Like a sense of belonging.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
um, I remember that at one point she ended up getting a new job, and it was with the local county, like health department that's there. And there was a woman who was there that my mother became very close with. We also became close with her family, and she was involved in a specific church that was in a town about a 20-minute drive from where we lived, 20-25 minutes. And this church was free holiness mission is what it's called, and I can categorize that as like a simple country church. So my experience is that you don't necessarily have to be a formal cookie cutter church to open up shop. And that's
Mm,
exactly what they did. It was a family, one family that opened this church, and then they not necessarily went out and I guess you could say said, "Oh, come to our church, do this, do that." But they just met people gradually over the years, and they built a community of about 50 to 70 people. Most of them belonged to this one specific family, and no one had, to the extent of my knowledge, any like formal theological training. It was just on a Sunday. The person who was a pastor, so I guess he had like a pastorship, but he would get up and lead services. But anyone at any point during the service could get up and testify or worship
mm,
is what they called it. And in the beginning, I saw how happy it made my mother and how supported she felt. And I mean, as a girl of 10, 11 at the time, I I, I should also be involved. You know, my mother
mm,
has my best interests at my heart and would or at heart, and wouldn't take me any place that I didn't feel uncomfortable. So I I started getting involved. I started going to Sunday school, and then they would do a Christmas play, like things like this. But at a certain point, I had questions that just
mm,
they didn't sit well with me, such as a lot of what I heard growing up was that this world is an awful place to be. We should be yearning and striving to go to heaven. So
mm,
my question is, well, why am I here then? If
mm,
that's the case, why am I here? I should It's not that if God is a loving and caring father in heaven, which is also what I equally heard, why would he put me here to then make me suffer and be miserable?
mm.
So
Those
that
are
was
great questions. That's deep questions for a kid.
yeah.
I guess you were a very thinking kid.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
and simultaneously, at the same time, my father remarried to my stepmother,
Mm,
and she was always attracted to like European history, but specifically World War
mm,
II. And she had a vast library with very deep and scholarly books about the Holocaust and World War II.
mm,
Um, and obviously, I wanted to connect to my stepmother at the time. And I started reading these books. So at 10, 11 years old, I'm reading Survival in Auschwitz by Primo Levi, um,
mm,
and pondering why I feel connected to this people. But at the same time, I wasn't raised in a place where you could just walk to the local Orthodox synagogue. There was no Orthodox synagogue. I didn't know of any Jews that lived near me. And yeah, so I had these questions of,
I'm wondering why you felt connected to the Jewish people when you saw them, like when you were reading about the Holocaust. Like here was a nation that was so oppressed and so tortured. Why did you feel connected to them?
if I think about it, no one's ever framed that question to me in that way before, because the only reason I can explain is that when I would read these books, when would read survival stories, those were my personal favorite survival accounts. I felt as though it just like clicked, the
Mm,
mostly to the pre-war life. You know,
mhm,
many of them would discuss what life was like in the shtetl. Some were more religious, obviously, than others, and they would describe what Shabbat was like or the shul aspect. And none of these never went in depth into Judaism, but it just felt like Shabbat. Oh,
mm,
that's a nice
mm,
concept. Um, but I think many converts, if you ask them, like, what was it that made you become
right.
Jewish? For all I can say is it felt natural. Um,
Interesting. Wow.
there were many years where I knew deep down that that was going to be my life's path, but I didn't know how I was going to get to it. Um,
Really? At such a young age, you felt that way? Even that's amazing. Like, did you know any Jews at the time?
I
Did you
knew no
have you did you? Did you
I
meet
knew
any Jews?
I knew no Jewish people, um, but my only contact to the Jewish people was through these autobiographies
Mm,
or historical nonfiction or historical fiction. I even enjoyed reading, based on real events, but just fictional characters. I also enjoyed that aspect. Um, but thank God, I was always well read for my age and could always articulate to others, not necessarily to people around me, but I could articulate to like a friend group, for example, that I had certain feelings. And so, Facebook comes up with these crazy things because I grew up in the age of where Facebook is like coming into it was cool to have a Facebook, right? You went from MySpace to Facebook. And I was 16 years old at the time, and I decided, I had a simple flip phone that could get like occasional www whatever, and so I logged on Facebook, and I thought it would
Good
be
old
fun.
days, right?
Yeah, exactly. I thought it would be funny after a conversation in AP English that I had with friends of mine where we were discussing our futures. I thought it'd be cool to post like, "Oh, my friend so and so said she was going to become a dentist, and my other friend Megan said she was going to become this." And then I, for whatever reason, said, "Well, one day I'm going to grow up and become a Jew." And so at the
Wow.
time, you're like,
And
okay,
how old were you? How old were you at that time?
I was 16.
16.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was in 11th grade. And at the time, I thought I was just posting a funny conversation. And I had classmates, obviously, who were my friends on Facebook, and they were like, "Oh, ha, 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 that's so funny." But then 10 years after that, when I'm 26, and, the concept of like, what am I going to do in terms of dating and did I make the right decision, blah, blah, blah. I log on Facebook one day and I see 10 years ago my memories and it's had that conversation. And it was just
Wow.
it was almost like yeah, a hug from the past. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, here we go.
Wow. So did your family know that you had those aspirations, or was it just something that was kind of like in the background, nothing that you were really going to act upon, but
It
just
was in the,
something that you were just enthralled with?
it was in the background, nothing I didn't have a way to act upon
Mhm.
it. I didn't have any Jewish friends. If I had told my mother I wanted to go meet with a rabbi, she would be like, "Really? You sure? Like, what's going on?" Um, and my father wasn't religious at all. My stepmother also. So like there wasn't a safe person to take this to at the age that
Mhm.
I was who would have taken it seriously, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm a mother of three young kids, thank God, and I have to put myself in those shoes. Like, if my kids came to me with the same type of thing, how would I respond? I would be like,
Of course.
"That's a little
Right. Right,
interesting,"
like so far out. Sure. Wow.
right?
Wow.
But also at the same time, you have to understand my mother loves me deeply and only wants the best for me, but she herself wasn't in a place where she could have been receptive to that.
Mhm.
I'll go back to what I was speaking about before with like the church that we were going to. I remember very clearly being 12 years old and just uncomfortable being in church with the way that the worship was going, with the way that the church style was. And when I did ask questions, genuine questions, it was like I was given some passive answer just to kind of hope with the hopes to satisfy whatever further questions I would have.
Mm.
And that looked like, well, it says so in the Bible, so we should just believe it.
Mm.
And
Mm.
I was like, but where does it say? And no one could give me an answer miraculously,
Mm.
but yet it's in the
Mm.
Bible. And that's
Mm.
another thing I could never wrap my head around is how could we be in a religion where we don't even know the scripture? I'm
Mm.
once again, this is my personal experience. It's not everyone's.
Mhm.
There are more learned sects of Christianity than others, but I just couldn't think of. why I would be spending 2, 3 hours of my life on a Sunday learning, quote unquote, something, and but not being able to cite directly where it was found, or having it be framed in such a specific way that it supports the narrative that they're trying to push.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so when I came with analytical questions, as any educated person would, I became problematic. um,
Mm,
Mostly like being encouraged to not ask so many questions, being encouraged to not think so think so deeply. And now looking back, it's like, well, that was quite rude. But at the time, it's like, okay, sure. But I realized deep down that I was trying to be molded into just another sheep in the flock, like
mm, mm,
just another one
mm,
to follow.
mhm,
And I didn't like that. So I actually developed like stomach cramps from anxiety.
mm. Oh,
And
wow.
this was before people were so open about talking about like anxiety or stress and the effects that it has on the body. But I
Mhm,
experienced it firsthand, to the point where I couldn't eat. It was just like very intense. But at the same time, anytime I tried to ask questions or try to voice my discomfort, it was, well, this is what we're doing. This is the church that we go to.
mm,
This is how things are, and there's really no other option. And
mm,
I would say like the crux of it all, the crescendo, you could say, was one Sunday. I remember very explicitly. I had built up in the drive to church, which was like 25, 30 minutes. I had built up in my head I was not going in that day. I could not, I would not, I was not going to do it. And I actually fought with my mother in the car, in the parking lot, refusing to get out of the car. I buckled myself in and I held on tight and I said, I'm not going.
wow.
And
Wow.
at the time, you know, it was a very big problem. I was causing discord for sure. But
Mm,
no matter what I could do, no matter what I did gently beforehand, it wasn't taken seriously. So it finally got to a
mhm,
point where I could not go in. And I did it for the entire duration of service. I think we went in for the last 10 minutes just because it was really, I could see it was really paining my mother and I didn't want to cause her that much pain. But um, I realized at that point there was no way out.
mm,
At the time I was 15, I think. So I had 3 more years, and I really 3 more years at home, and I really developed a sort of just fake it till you make it
mm,
mindset.
mm,
My mother said, "So long as you're in my house, you're going to go to church." I said, "Okay, I'll go there. I'll be there physically, but I'm not going to be involved mentally. Don't get me involved in anything. I'm not interested."
mm.
And that's how I
Wow.
the rest of my years at my mother's house.
Well, I mean, you sound like such an intelligent, sensitive, questioning person who really was really looking for something deeper and looking for some truth, and very mature beyond your years. And I
Yes,
guess it's those qualities that led you to actually come to the life that you're leading today, because you've taken, not the regular route that people would take, living in South Africa now as a shlucha, right?
yeah, exactly.
Wow.
It
So
also it
yeah,
also
go ahead.
I just want to touch that, like, it also impacts me as a mother now,
Mm,
meaning I have more compassion and more patience, you could say, with my children, and I take them seriously because in Judaism we have this concept that children are the purest form of neshama, like soul that you could have here in this world.
mhm,
And if any of my children were to have questions, such as, what is God? What is Hashem? What is the Torah? What is Chassidus? What is this? I take them very seriously because you never
mm,
know what they're thinking of, what they're going through. And
mhm,
I can't remember what my memories were, obviously before like 5, 6, but who knows what sort of things I was talking about. And everyone was just like,
mm,
oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, sure.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, you were mature beyond your years, it looks like, and you were asking questions that people weren't comfortable with. They weren't comfortable with searching and finding the answers to, and probably didn't have the answers to.
Right.
Did
They
did
didn't.
how did your mother and father react once you actually did convert? What was their reaction? And do you have a relationship with them today?
So my mother, yes, we actually have a very good relationship. There was a lot of, I guess you could say, like she just didn't know.
Mhm,
What is this? So you have to understand also in the timeline of my life, right? I graduated high school 18. Um, I went to Germany for that summer between high school and university. I came back.
why Germany?
So like I mentioned before, I was always in advanced classes in high school. I went to public school,
Mhm,
so AP honors, those were always on my register, my timetable for the year. And in one of those classes, we had to, the AP English class, we had to submit a year's worth of writing samples. And so I decided to be out of the box. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start email correspondence with someone in a different country.
mm,
So I met my friend Isabel, who lives in Berlin, in Germany, and we corresponded via email for 2 years.
mm,
And at the end of those 2 years, my father and my stepmother gave me a ticket to go to visit her for the summer between high school and university, and that was an incredible experience. It didn't do anything like uh, for Yiddishkeit, but it was just being in Germany, being in Europe, and I guess playing into that fascination with the Holocaust, like it happened in Europe,
mhm,
and
mhm,
when you walk in Berlin, you see the Stoppelsteine, like the stones that are on the ground, and if it's raining, you slip because they're slick, and it causes you to look, and then you read the name of a victim, um, and where they lived. Obviously, it's in front of the house when they're born, everything that happened, and also there is the Holocaust memorial that they have there. So it was just really an incredible experience for someone who is 17
was so
turning 20.
fascinated. And you
Yeah,
were so fascinated with the Holocaust also, so here you're seeing where it actually happened, right?
exactly.
Wow.
And yeah, so when I came back from Germany, I changed my major from, I think it was like international studies at the time, and I changed it to German languages and literatures, and then I added on a dual degree. So I did 2 degrees at the same time at my university, and that was political science.
Mhm.
My dream was to be like the American ambassador to Germany, like to Berlin. um,
Really?
that was, yeah, like I think Madam Secretary is one of the last TV shows that I watched, and that was like I loved that so much. That's exactly how I envisioned my life to go. So obviously, because I'm studying a foreign language, any foreign language degree will tell you that you need to live in the country that you're trying
Mm,
to learn the
mhm,
language from. So I went and did an exchange year, my third year of undergrad, and I lived in Freiburg, which is in the Black Forest. Think of like the
mhm,
most picturesque German town, quaint. Um, it even had they call them Becheles. It's like little streams going through the
mhm.
and it reminds me a lot of where I live now. So
Really?
yeah, Freiburg is one of the places on the Alsace region between France and Germany where they grow a lot of the wine grapes. And here in Stellenbosch, I live in um, one of the largest wine producing, if not the largest wine producing region in South Africa. And the climate is the
Mm.
same, very harsh, hot summers, but then it could fluctuate. You could experience all 4 seasons in a day. And then the winters are mostly like cold, rainy, overcast. So, yeah, there's a lot of similarities between the two places.
Interesting. Wow. So
And
I'm curious, like, how you got to actually the conversion, like, how did that happen? Or how did you get to Judaism? Like, you're in Germany, you're studying for your degrees, you're very smart, it sounds like, and you're doing a lot of degrees and, you're growing in your knowledge.
right, so it
Really.
was, I went without a group. So there are two options that my university offered. For the specific university, it was just a direct exchange. So that meant one of their students from Freiburg University was coming to my university in North Carolina, and then they took my spot and I took their spot.
Mm,
And so I didn't know anyone, and obviously in the first few weeks, you're trying to meet friends, you're trying to meet people because you're going to be here for a year. And even
mm,
though I'd studied German, it's just textbook. I hadn't actually practiced the language fluently. So I struggled also a little in the beginning with not being able to communicate with any Germans. So if Germans were on my floor in the dormitory, I didn't really speak to them. Also because that area, unless you were a university student, you didn't speak English. So, and that's
mm.
specifically why I chose it. I wanted to be forced to speak German, to learn German fluently. So I ended up bumping into a girl from Canada who was here with a group. So it was 12 of them all together. And she, interestingly enough, had her father's Jewish, her mother isn't. But that summer before she came to the exchange program, they went and visited their long lost relatives that were Jewish.
Mm, mhm.
And they got to meet that family and realized that that family only survived because they escaped, essentially. So once again, the Holocaust link. So her and I had quite a lot to discuss, and then she introduced me to the wider friend group. And there was a boy in the friend group that I ended up dating, and he also, his father was Jewish, his mother wasn't. But we had a very serious relationship for 3 years, and his family that was like the Jewish side, I was very close to. So that got me thinking. Well, before I get to that, I'll say that while we were there as uni students, obviously we're just a group of kids who Friday night they want something to do, not necessarily do always want to go out. So we started hosting like matzo ball soup nights, um,
Yeah.
and just like, or I would make challah, and we would just eat that on a Friday night, and it was fun, and we were just getting together and spending time with each other. So that's where it really like developed, and the
Like,
interest.
how did you know about matzo ball soups or challah
So through this boyfriend that I
through
had,
the
because
family?
he
Oh,
grew
okay.
up eating that
Okay.
all the time. And
Okay.
so I mean, obviously because he wasn't Orthodox, but his family was very, I guess you could say, culturally Jewish. So
Mm,
ate matzah on Pesach. They lit the menorah, but
mhm,
um,
mhm.
the concept of matzo ball soup, it was not necessarily on Friday night, but it was around. So that was my intro. And then obviously, the year ends and we are still dating each other. And so we're trying to figure out, how is this going to work? Is there a future? Is there not? And that is ultimately what got me thinking, okay, how um, do I want to raise my family, my future family, please God, with a religion? And if I had to choose any religion, I think the one that makes the most sense is Judaism.
Mm.
Once again, I didn't even have any like textual um, information to back up that decision because I
Right.
hadn't learned anything at that point, but it just felt right. It just clicked.
Just sounds like something was intuitively pulling you.
Yeah. And so
I
also
guess your soul. I guess your neshama was pulling you.
100%
Yeah,
and
it's the
leading me
only
in
way to understand it.
right, and leading me in the right direction. And so after
Mhm,
that year, whilst we're having this conversation of, what's going to happen, what's going to be, I started going to a conservative synagogue that's in the same town as my university. So where to put into context, where I went to university is about an hour and a half's drive away from my hometown. So
mm,
although I didn't grow up in an area with a synagogue, where I went to university, there was one, just a
mhm,
liberal community. And um, that's where I started having the concept of Friday night Shabbat dinners, because they would do
Mm,
those once a month. There was always Friday night davening services. I started lighting Shabbos candles then. That's
mm,
also when I really got into making challah. As a university student, you're doing it with whatever you have, but this is really when I started making it, and I would make it and take it to the shul. Even if we
mm.
didn't have a full meal, I would still bake it and take, and people could have. Um, so that's where the I guess you could say introduction to the basics of Judaism started and was fostered. And I did go through eventually a conservative conversion,
Hmm.
which at the time I thought was the real deal. This is amazing. Like I can become Jewish but still eat at whatever restaurant I want to. There was a
Right.
concept of kosher friendly, but not necessarily that we keep kosher still to this day. And at the time, like I said, I thought it was the real deal, but it also ended up benefiting me in the long run, because fast forward to when I moved back to Germany and was really trying to figure out what I wanted. Did I want to stay as a conservative Jew? Did I want to convert to Orthodox? I was able to apply to a birthright program because I had the conservative reform
Mm,
certificate.
mhm,
And
mhm.
that trip to Israel was really what made me realize that, okay, I want to do this properly. There's so much that I am missing out on, so much that I don't even know, and I want to pursue that.
Wow. And what made you, like, what was drawing you into Judaism? What was, once you learned about, practice and orthodoxy, was there something that you appreciated about it, or was it just, again, that intuitive feeling?
Not so much the intuitive feeling; it was there. That's obviously what propels you to continue, especially on the track to conversion. I mean, thank God, like my path was only 8 months, 9 months, and that's because
Mm,
I had a very good rabbi who was vouching for me. I went to synagogue. Yeah, shul synagogue. I went every Shabbos. I davened completely from the siddur, the
this
full.
this is where were you when you were doing this? This is back in where?
This is in Brooklyn, in Crown
This
Heights.
is back in Brooklyn and Crown Heights,
Yeah.
uh-huh, okay.
So, yeah, to just backtrack, so it's easy. I did go end up moving back to Germany for a few years, for 2 years, and that's where I didn't feel at home anymore in a liberal synagogue. There were too many
Mm,
questions. Also, once again, not enough answers. And I got in contact with someone in Antwerp who grew up Satmar, and then
mhm,
left the fold. So he introduced me to people who actually were Orthodox, not only in Antwerp, but also in Israel. And getting to see that lifestyle was really what was like, oh, they have something that I don't have and not many other people do. I want that. And then that's what propelled me after the birthright trip to move back to America
mhm.
and just
What
find
did you see that they had that you didn't have? Like, what did you feel that they had?
they had a cohesive family unit. They had
Mm,
peace, they had communication, they had dialogue. When I say I was raised in a traditional American family, I mean the television was on all the time, 24/7.
mhm,
And actually, when I went to Germany as an exchange student, that's one thing I struggled with: the silence.
mhm,
I couldn't be
mhm,
in a. I didn't have a television. I couldn't be in. I couldn't stand the silence. And I actually
mm.
went through like technology withdrawals. And so when people now remark about me being like Chabad, and they make snarky comments of, oh, well, you don't have a television in your house. I'm like, well, yeah, actually, that's irrespective of if I was Chabad or not. Like, I would make that decision for myself.
Right, right.
Like,
Wow,
yeah. So,
wow.
my first priority was to just find a job in a city that had a large Jewish population. Obviously, everyone knows New York, Brooklyn, but I
Mm,
never wanted to be in a big city. I felt like if I moved there, I was just going to be another one lost in the crowd. How would I be able to
mm,
find a support system? How would I be able to meet people? That sort of thing. And so I applied mostly to jobs in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., some in Baltimore, and occasionally I would see things in Brooklyn or New York that I would apply to. And interestingly enough, now looking back, I had one interview in Philadelphia and all of my other interviews were in New York. So it
Mm.
was meant to
It was
be, I
meant
guess
to
you
be.
could say. Um,
Right.
Even when I moved to Brooklyn, I didn't move into Crown Heights right away. I moved into like one of those hybrid neighborhoods that is there that you know is, as they say, gentrified. Like it wasn't a Jewish neighborhood because then again, also I wanted to just give myself the space to figure things out in a calm and thorough manner. Would I want to become Litfish and be in Flatbush? Would I want to be Borough Park Hasidish? Would I want to be in Williamsburg? You know, even though like Satmar Hasidim live in Williamsburg, there's also a lot of young professional Jewish people who are living there because it's quite a short commute to Manhattan. So would I want to be there?
Mm.
Would I want to be in Crown Heights, Brooklyn Heights? Where exactly do I feel myself settling? And I strategically chose a neighborhood in the middle of all of them, but also the commute to work was like 20 minutes. So that was awesome. And it was a 30-minute walk into Crown Heights. So anytime I went to Shul or anytime I went to a Shabbos meal or whatever, it was always in Crown Heights.
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, that's where I
And
was.
how did you make connections in Crown Heights? Like, how did you get yourself invited? People knew you?
So I'm an introvert extrovert. Like
Mm.
I need my time to myself to just recharge,
Mhm.
but I also just really like meeting people. And I think that served me
Mm.
well as a Rebbetzin.
Mhm.
I don't have
Mhm.
a fear of going up and introducing myself to people. I can
Mm.
make conversation with really anyone. And when I started going to Shul, it was to a Shul that was like outside of Crown Heights in like the Brooklyn Heights area towards Grand Army Plaza. And I enjoyed it because, like, on a lovely day, Brooklyn does have them. It was such a nice
Mm.
walk, and that was such a nice thing to do in the morning. Because I was also very, like, at the time, I was very active. So one thing I struggled with when keeping Shabbos is like not having a run. So
Mm.
I got my exercise, and then I went to Shul. I
Mm.
fed my neshama, and the davening was done in such a way that I felt like I could keep up, even though I wasn't davening in Hebrew. But through time, obviously, I I could learn, okay, we're at this point, and then this is what happens, and this and this, and I was able to slowly convert over to davening in Hebrew certain parts,
Mm.
and could feel like one of the congregation, even though obviously I wasn't Jewish. And that rabbi did an incredible job of just vouching for my sincerity and what I did know to the rabbis on the RCA, the Rabbinical Council of America, based in. And yeah, thank God. December 31st, the last day of 2018, I went to the mikvah and converted.
Wow. And that was within an 8-month period. So that was,
Yeah,
I mean, you obviously were learning quickly. Wow.
yeah.
And so that's quite a journey. Now you've converted. How
Mhm.
did you meet your husband?
So I laugh because, like, looking back, it's my life. So this is my life story. But if I were someone else reading this in a book, it's like this is a fairy tale. Like this doesn't happen to people. But it does, and everyone has their own story. I have my husband has. You never know what anyone is ever going through, and you never know where people have been and where they're going to. So I'll just say that, like, with that being said, to always extend kindness to other people because
Mm.
and compassion, because you never know what they're struggling with.
Mm.
And so, anyways, I've converted, thank God. Now I've achieved my crux of everything that I've been striving for the last like 5 years. I was running a marathon, and I had the like naive thought that once I became a Jewish person with a neshama and everything, all of my problems would be fixed, and that was not the case. And I actually had a very good friend at the time who said the night before that I went to the mikveh, I made a comment, I just can't wait to feel this overwhelming sensation of relief. And
Mm.
she heard me out and she said, but I want you to know that if you don't feel that, it's also okay. And I'm so glad
Mm.
that she said that to
So
me.
wise. Right.
I didn't feel it. And
Mm.
I felt like things were just beginning, really.
Mm.
So, yeah, at this point, I was working and I said, I'm not dating for a few years. I need to figure out where on the Chabad spectrum I see myself, what I want to do. Do I want, it was never a
At
question.
that point, you thought you would be Chabad at that point.
Yeah, at that point, it was pretty locked in. I, yeah, I took my time.
What was it that about Chabad that really attracted you?
Um, first and foremost, the Haknasas Orchim. So I thank
The
God.
welcoming guests.
Yes, yes, the welcoming of guests and also just the invitations. Um,
Mm.
because I was so social, I met a lot of people, and I developed quite a circle of contacts, you could say. I always had where to go for Shabbos.
Mm.
Not everyone, especially young Jewish women in Crown Heights, have that. It's getting better now,
Mhm.
thank God to
Mhm.
programs like Living Chassidus and other Machon Yehudis, other options. Um, but I was just very social, and I went in with, if I get an invitation, I'll go and I'll meet
Mm.
people, and if I like them, then I'll go back and I'll develop relationships. And um, it ended up being such a bracha because when my husband and I did get married, we got married in a smaller hall in Crown Heights, but it was packed to the brim with
Wow.
people. The people
Wow.
were coming. It was just like it was such a lively evening, like incredible. And it's because of how I got to know people,
Mm.
or knowing the amount of people that I knew. So I just focused on myself, and I focused on developing myself and my relationship with the Rebbe. So first off, I would say obviously welcoming of guests, hosting people, being very open and warm. But then second is the Rebbe, really. Um,
Mm.
a lot of the stuff that the Rebbe says obviously is in like Hebrew or Yiddish, and someone who's a convert can struggle in the beginning to understand or to connect to that. Thank God now they're doing a lot more in English, and it's like direct translation, and if you know a little bit of Yiddish, which I knew German, so that kind of helped me in some regards, and I could read Hebrew letters, so I was already at 5 steps ahead than the average person. But really just hearing um, warm stories about the Rebbe and watching gem videos and reading books such as what is the book? It's by Reb Zalman Jaffe, Manchester. I
Mm.
think it's
Mm.
different titles depending where you are, but like Manchester Man. Um, and I was just like connecting to the Rebbe through other people's accounts because obviously I, you know, am not going to have a
Mm.
personal like yechidus with the Rebbe. And interestingly enough, Reb Zalman Jaffe's grandson, great grandson, I think great one of those. He actually is a main supporter of our Chabad house now. He lives here in South
Oh,
Africa,
wow.
Cape Town,
Wow.
and yeah, so it just shows you, things are connected, and yeah, they're incredible people. He and his wife and family, but um, yeah, so at the time, I'm just focusing on building that up and finding myself within Chabad. And at the time, I was living in a two-bedroom basement, in as many single girls do. And a few doors down was a friend of mine who was from South Africa, but now lived in America with her husband. And her and I became close. She was a good friend, a friend that I could talk to and deal with things that I was going through, unpack the pechalach that I had been
Mhm.
carrying for however long. And at this time, it's also COVID, so everything's shut down. My job,
Mhm.
I'm working remote. I'm forced once again to be by myself and to deal with the silence, be in the silence, sit in the
Mhm.
silence that is my atmosphere. And she on the one day she asked me, "Are you interested in starting to date?" And I said, I think so, but I don't know where to start. She said, okay, so put together a resume, send it to me. I'll give you my feedback. I asked a few other friends. I really tried to ask a wide range of people just so I could get different perspectives because no two people are the same. They're not going to read it the same, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
And once we got it to a proper situation, once we got it to a
Resume.
proper resume, um, she said, I'll send it to my mother. My mother lives in Sfas and she meets lots of people. So you never know. She can meet someone and she'll have your resume to share. And going in, I said, okay, I'm not marrying anyone who's American. I'm not marrying French. I'm not marrying Israeli. And she goes, all right, well, that narrows it down.
Right.
Yes, but he's out there. I know he is. And the whole time, even before I converted, I was always davening for my husband. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know where he was, but I was always davening with full sincerity that he was happy, that he was doing what he needed to do to come and meet me. And
Mm.
um, I was given the name of someone by my friend's mother, and I had a different friend looking into this name that was suggested. And she called Rabbi Mo, who runs Ascent in Sfas, and was asking questions that would be in line with someone who wears a hat, jacket, that type of stuff. Now, mind you, I didn't put that on my resume because I was already so limited, so narrowing in my preferences of nationality.
Mm.
I didn't want to
Right.
narrow it down
But you were
any.
looking for like a serious boy who was seriously into the learning of
Correct.
Judaism
Yes.
and serious into learning of Hasidus.
Someone who
Right.
made davening 3 times a day a priority, someone who um, at the same time made their connection to Hashem sincere and honest.
Mhm.
So my friend is asking these questions about this first name that came forward, and the Rabbi Mo, stops her and says, "No, no, no, no." He says, "So I don't know what she's really looking for because questions that she's asking are for someone who is a very serious Chabad student. This person is not it." So, but however, I did just happen to meet one who's here on a break from Jerusalem from my note, and I don't know, maybe she'll be interested. And I got to the resume, and at first I saw that he could speak German.
Mm.
Um, but then also
Because he
I
spent some time there, right? He spent some
right.
time in Germany.
So you get the resume, and obviously it was a Chabad match profile, so it lists like very categorically like the languages. So that was the first thing that jumped out to me was he speaks German, and then after that I looked him up on Facebook and I saw that he still had his location as like Karlsruhe in Germany. I'm like, wait,
Mm.
and then I said, okay, so obviously he's lived in Germany for a period of time, and probably significantly if he can speak German. And even before having made shidduch like calls, I said, okay, I have to at least meet this person because there's no
Mm.
two people that are both converts, similar backgrounds that have lived in Germany. So I have to figure out that. But also, of course, I did the research, and I had a rabbi, Arla Loshak, and his wife Khani, who I knew ever since I came into Crown Heights. I still am close to them. I keep contact with them, and he was the only. I don't know what made him come to my mind is like to call him and ask him if he could do this, but he was the only person who I could trust to really ask the questions that I needed to ask. He knows the lingo. He knows like he's able to give it to me in English terms, layman terms, sort of the level of student that this suggestion would be holding at. Turns out
Mhm.
turn it turns out he's also related to uh, some of the administration people in Mino, so he had a direct connection. Was able to get the truth, and so he he gets my questions answered, and then he phones me back and he says, yeah, so this guy is the very legitimate. He's the real deal. I said, oh, really? And he said, yeah. I've heard only incredible things. And also, I just don't know if you're aware, but like he is biracial. And I stopped in my tracks because that just didn't even cross my mind. Like,
Mm,
what?
mm,
I think I asked him, like, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, like he is of a mixed background. And I don't know if that's a thing for you or not. Whatever it is, you have to think about that. But this is the information that I have. I'm presenting it to you, and you do with it what you will. And he was like, wishing you much success. And at the same time, in the physical world, you're having the protests that are happening at Grand Army Plaza, Atlantic Barclay
mm,
Center for George Floyd. So race
mhm.
was a very heavy,
Big issue. Mm,
very real topic being discussed and openly at the moment when this all comes to
mm,
the forefront. And I had to think to myself, like, here I am, a white, blonde, blue eyed girl from
mm,
the southern United States. Yes, I went to school with African Americans and other backgrounds, but like, I, it never crossed my mind to consider like dating them, and I don't know why. Like it just
mm,
never was anything that like came up into that. It came to the forefront, um, and so I actually sat and I was thinking to myself, is this an issue? Is it
mm,
something worth giving more thought to it than necessary? Because since it's going on in the background, right, with these protests and people talking about it and it's heated and um, I didn't want to over dramatize something that didn't necessarily need to be dwelled upon. So
mm,
I thought to myself, like, is it really an issue? Is it not? Is it? So at that point, I decided it wasn't, obviously,
mhm.
to meet. And I said, if it I have to see if I can first off click with this person spiritually, mentally, emotionally, but then also if the physical attraction is there, and if it's there, then what? Uh, Race has nothing to do with it, in my eyes.
Sure, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, so we had a first Zoom meeting because my husband was in Israel at the time. Obviously, he's studying in my note. I'm in America. It's COVID. No one's traveling anywhere unless it's extenuating circumstances. We had a first Zoom meeting as a date. And at this point in time, it's COVID. It's end of July 2020. No one's traveling anywhere. My husband's in Israel at yeshiva. I'm in America working remote. And we would meet every Sunday. The planned meeting was to be about 2 to 3 hours. Zoom dating is different than obviously in person dating. But even then, we would spend 6 hours on a call with each other, just
Wow, wow. You just
like,
had so much in common.
yeah, and we just enjoyed each other's company. Now, this is a real testament to my husband because for me, I was on East Coast time, so it was like 2 p.m., 1 p.m. For him, it was after school, after yeshiva, which was 9:30 after he had davened Ma'ariv, evening prayers. And then he's sitting up for 6 hours and into the night to then wake up at 6 o'clock the next morning, 5 o'clock the next morning,
Wow.
whatever. So it's a real testament to his dedication and who he
How
is.
much he liked you.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And
Wow.
it's interesting though, just to touch on the subject of race once more, because I don't think it's necessarily discussed so openly in our circles, Chabad circles, from
Mhm.
circles. Um, you know, going back to you never know what anyone's going through, you never know what anyone is thinking. Now, thank God we have three beautiful children. To me, I see three beautiful Jewish kids, blonde hair, you know, olive skin, brown eyes, deep brown eyes, gorgeous. I don't think anything of it. I'm their mother, right? But
Of
people make
course.
comments all the time of like,
Really.
I have a baby, right? I actually got this comment like the day my second was born. He has such beautiful olive skin. Like, what?
Wow.
Why?
Wow.
Not that it's meant in a negative way, but it's just, you know, come on, guys, think a little bit before
Speaking like that.
speaking.
Sure.
I mean, people
Sure.
assume people assume that my husband is like Middle Eastern, Mizrahi background. Not that I'm necessarily going to go and change their opinion, but why is it that one of the first comments is like, "Oh, so where are
Mm.
you really from?" I
Mm.
don't get that
Wow.
because,
Right.
you know,
Sure.
yeah,
Right.
it's
Wow. So I'm curious. Okay, so you met him, you met your husband. Where did the shluchas come in? How coming moving all the way to South Africa on shluchas? That's quite a step.
yeah. So on that first date was when we hashed out all of these details because obviously in the shidduch system, you try to get the nitty gritty things out within the first few dates because if it's not compatible, meaning where you want to live, what you want to do in the future, how you want to raise kids, that
Mm.
those those
That's a no-go.
fundamental values, you could say, there's no point in extending the meetings because there's
Right.
just it's just not, this yeah no point. So on the first date, I think you'd say we could jump into it right away. I said, I'm a very like to the point. I needed to figure out if this was it or not. I didn't want to waste anyone's time. I didn't want to waste my time. And I was also very nervous and I had a lot of anxiety at that point in my life. And I was afraid that I was going to be in a situation where I wouldn't know if this was it or not. So I asked my husband, I said, "Where do you want to live?" And he goes, "Well, I'll let you answer. What do you think? Many Americans probably want to stay in America." I said, "I don't want to stay in America. I I I want to go live somewhere else." And he's like, "Okay, well, what about Israel?" I said, "Yeah, I mean, I put it on my resume just so I didn't narrow myself down too much, but like, we both realized it would be very hard to make a successful living in Israel,
Mm.
and it would be a very hard lifestyle. So for us personally, so did we want that? And we realized no. And he actually came up with the next comment was, "Well, what about South Africa?" I never been to South Africa before. I've traveled to 18 countries in Europe, but never South Africa. Americans don't know much about South Africa. I was raised in public school. All I knew about South Africa was that there was apartheid. Then there's a man named Nelson Mandela who was freed after almost 30 years in prison, and then that was it. So, but I'm also thinking like Africa. Oh, interesting. Never really had any desire to go there. And I said, well, but what would we do there? Like, let's get to the point. And he goes, "Well, we would do shluchas." My mother's from Stellenbosch. I went to university in Stellenbosch, and there is a large growing Jewish community of students there at the university. And we would just go and be, a frum family, a religious family living in Stellenbosch, and obviously on shluchas, working with the Jewish people who are here. And at that point, I was working in nonprofits, Jewish nonprofits. So I did have the concept of like giving back, not necessarily making money for profit in a line of work. And I had a lot of from birth friends who had relatives who were on shluchas, and I knew that lifestyle through them. And obviously, not every single detail, but I knew a majority of like the big details. And I said, "Oh, okay, sure." And he was like, "What, really?" He's like, "You moved to
Ah,
South Africa as an American?" I said, "Yeah, it sounds like an adventure." I say yes, but like let me also go and research the town and look at it in pictures and learn a little more about South Africa. And that's what I did after the date. I went and I spent a couple hours just looking into the country, looking into some of the ongoing politics and also Stellenbosch. And I was like, yeah, it's gorgeous, amazing. And
amazing.
that's really how
Wow.
that dream came,
I
you
mean,
know.
you both stayed in for a little bit. He was learning more in yeshiva, and you were learning a little bit more as well, and then you moved out afterwards, I understand, right?
Yeah, so while I was like I guess you could say single and then and working, I studied in the night at Mochan Hana, which is a seminary in
Mhm.
Crown Heights. So that's where I did my Torah education. But also, there's an organization called Living Chassidus, which is run by Michal and Sharon Weiss in Crown Heights. And that was truly what propelled me in my Yiddishkeit, in my Judaism. They brought in speakers from all different backgrounds, all different spectrums within Chabad. They really created a social circle for girls, but also a learning center. So I
Mhm.
met people through there, and then I also had friends who were involved with Bat Sheva Learning Center. So even though I wasn't necessarily studying at Bat Sheva Learning Center, I had friends who were of the mindset to be like, come, let's learn a Hasidic discourse on Shabbos afternoon, or do you want to get
Mm.
together on a Wednesday night and go through a sikha, like a talk from, the Rebbe.
Mhm.
So I had that in my life, and then I also had my own interests within Judaism. I really enjoy learning halacha. Like that goes to
Jewish
my
law. Mhm.
yeah to my educated background. So
Mhm.
um, that was what I was doing, like for myself. But then also, yes, my husband was at seminary yeshiva, excuse me, and he also was learning to be a scribe at the same time.
Mm.
And
Mm.
then when we were, united in America and we got married in Brooklyn, he did Kollel, which is basically a continuing education yeshiva for married men, newly married men. Usually for the first 1 to 2 years, they give up, not give up, but they immerse themselves in Kollel life, and they don't go into like a full-fledged career, and
Mhm.
they dedicate they dedicate that time to extended Torah study.
Growing and mhm.
Correct. And so my husband was doing that. I was working and supporting us, and he also, obviously, like the Kollel stipend is something that he was receiving, but I was working, he was learning. And then in our second year of being married, yeah, he received smicha from Laman Yilmadu. So all the
Rabbinic
while,
ordination, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
so all the while he was continuing to learn, and that's also at the same time while we're waiting for like the green card paperwork to come through. So one thing I really admire about my husband is that he had time on his hands. He wasn't able to work during the day because of waiting for the green card to the work authorization to come through, but he still wanted to do something valuable with his time. So he learned to become a rabbi. And then
Mm.
after that, he learned to become a ritual slaughterer, a shochet,
Mhm.
um, afterwards with the same program. And um, we took the 3 years of us being 2.5, almost 3 years of being in Crown Heights as a married couple, as a family, to build ourselves up to eventually be able to come on shluchas and support ourselves.
Mhm.
And the area that we're in, to put it in context for people, the closest school, the closest mikveh, the closest any type of Orthodox Jewish center is an hour away. So
Wow.
we're outside of the greater Cape Town community. And then so you have Cape Town, then you have us, and then an 18-hour drive you have Johannesburg. So
Wow.
when it comes to like Judaism, where we are, um, a Jewish life rather, and organizations or structures that support that, we're very isolated. But at the
Mm.
same time, we do it with pleasure. People
Mm.
make remarks all the time of, "Wow, it's such a schlep, such a drive taking your children to and from school. It's an hour
Mm.
one way, but there's no other option." And
Mm.
even if I, it just there's no other thought of course I'm going to send them to Jewish school, and this is where also Hasidus comes into play, because anytime, and I've seen it in my own life as well, anytime you give Hashem just a little bit, he opens up so many possibilities. And that comes through in various
Mm.
ways: blessings, material, spiritual blessings. Um, when people remark to me, wow, you drive an hour one way for your kids, I'm like, yeah, that's nothing. What's even more incredible is the fact that God gives me the money to put gas in my car to make the drive. And I say that with full sincerity, because there's no other way that it would happen, you know?
Mm,
So my husband and I both, like, in our life and in our shluchas here, all we do is we make the vessel. We make a in Chassidus it's explained as like we make a kli. We make we do something in order to allow us to bring down those blessings from God. So that's taking our kids to Jewish school, even though we live an hour away, and it would be so easy to just take them to the creche that's right across the street from my house. Really.
mm,
um,
mm,
we eat kosher. Granted, it's slightly easier for us because my husband is a ritual slaughterer. So, um, you know, we have a concept of being able to get kosher food easily and it's accessible to us. Um, Other people here would be totally fine with just eating, vegetarian. Um,
mm.
but and even if it's cooked by a non-Jew, they would still eat, and because that's just all that there is. But yeah, with that, and then also, you know, going to, for example, like, uh, hold on, let me stop. Um,
Okay, we're gonna have to like summarize, like come to a conclusion now because we're way past the time, but that's okay. You were great. So let's just I want you to just say something like that you want some message that you want people, something inspiring that you want. I mean, this is amazing what you've done.
I tried to also put little nuggets like throughout. um,
100% for sure, for
um,
sure.
let's see.
Okay, so
I
so
think
let
if
let me
it's a
just
pause and you frame it like a
yeah,
question, then I can answer, and then
yeah,
they can edit
yeah,
however they
yeah.
want.
So you're just amaze me because your life has been so incredible, from where you came to where you are now. And, especially going on shluchas, which is not something that was required of you. And yet you're doing your self-sacrifice. You're really going out of your way for Judaism, for teaching to other people. What pushes you to do that? What pushed you to want to do that? And what gives you the motivation on a day-to-day basis?
It's a good question because I think everyone, no matter how religious or not religious you are, you always struggle in how do I connect to God on a daily basis? How do I make it real? How do I make it me? How do I internalize this in a real way? And I think throughout my whole life, I've always been blessed to do that.
Mhm.
Granted, throughout the years, it took various forms. But for me, I have a very good support system with um, other shluchas that I can reach out to. I have mentors. I have good friends, also who are on shluchas and they deal with similar things that I deal with. Um, but ultimately, what keeps me motivated and going is really learning, learning. And I'm not always great at it because obviously I'm very busy. I drive 1 hour one way to take my kids to school. And then also I have three littles. So they take up a lot of my time and I'm very hands on with them. And I enjoy that. And at the end of the day, I'm like tuckered out. And then
Okay.
to get the motivation to pull myself up at 8 p.m. and then learn something so I can give it over to girls at the Shabbos meal or to put together a flyer for a social event that we're going to have. Everything in me says, no, don't do it. No, no, no. But I know ultimately at the end of the day, because of what I've learned, that it's just trying to stop me from bringing in the light that needs to be brought into this part of the world. If you think of it, my
Mm,
husband and I are the only people who could do this. This was meant for us.
mm,
This was made for us. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says that if you see a void anywhere, a need, and if you can fill it, then you need to fill it. That is God showing you that that is your mission in this world. And my husband and I live that every single day.
mm,
And I just think if I had come into contact with someone in my university that was like me, such as
Mm.
a Rebbetzin or someone who was growing spiritually, how much of an impact that would have had on me. And the students that are here, they I want to help them so badly because they grew up with a sense of what Judaism is. They went to shul on Friday night. The South African Jews that are here, they're very traditional. So they will go to shul on Friday night. They might keep kosher in home, and they might eat non kosher out, or they go to shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and they have Pesach Seders. But it doesn't go much past that.
Mm.
And if they could just see from a caring and loving and joyful point of view that there's so much richness that they're
Mm.
unfortunately missing out on, it's my duty to show them that. And my husband and I do our utmost best every single day to try to engage them and to try to show them what a real religious Jewish family looks like. And
Mm.
you'll never know, we hear stories all the time. Someone said one thing and it didn't show up for 5 years. It didn't impact them for 5 years, but then um, that's what they fall back on. So, yeah.
Wow. Eliana Duthie, you are such an inspiration. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for doing the amazing work that you're doing. It's incredible.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Wow. Just wow. How inspiring was that? I mean, Aliana Duthie is just incredible. Her husband as well was so incredible. If you haven't watched his, I would highly recommend you go back and watch his interview that we had a while ago, but it was really, really worth it. And Eliana was just incredible. I just so fascinated by her story. Something was pulling her all those years, something intuitive within her was saying, like, look into Judaism, and was really pushing her towards that. I mean, she was obviously from young childhood an incredibly intelligent, sensitive, thoughtful person, always asking questions, and those questions really led her to where she knew intuitively she would be. It was almost like her neshama was pulling her. But there's one thing to just convert to Judaism, not just, it's one thing to convert to Judaism, which is a huge step, and quite another thing to then move out to far out South Africa to this little community where she lives, which is an hour away from the regular Jewish community that's there, to move on shluchas there. And her devotion and her enthusiasm for sharing the teachings that she was given. And as she said, it was only her and her husband who could really be doing what they're doing. I love that message that she brought as well of how we need to really realize that the people that we meet, she looks at it as if had someone met her when she was searching in that way, how much they could have given her and how these students who are in university, how she's now able to give to them and to answer their questions. Um, Her story is really incredible, and it's really a testament to how much the Jewish neshama pulls us and how much we can each accomplish and do with our lives. I loved hearing her story. I wonder what your comments and thoughts are. Please share them below. We love to hear from you. If you are not subscribed to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories, please make sure you are subscribed at Chabad.org/extraordinary. You'll get them right into your inbox as well. You can find us on YouTube and on all podcast platforms. Thank you so much for watching and for being a part of this extraordinary community.